Good morning. What's on my mind? I'm Dr. Dale Dangleben, and on behalf of Patient Choice in Ximenez Point, Michelle, this is the medical tidbit of the morning. I'm going to go historical, but still medical. And I want to tell a story. It's really a story, though. I want to tell a story of the CHLORDECONE catastrophe. It's called Capone or CHLORDECONE, right? How a banned poison fueled the prostate cancer crisis in the Caribbean, right? My aim with these videos is to educate, expose, and to bring out an awareness, right, about public health, right? And that includes any catastrophes, right, and things that continue to unfold, some of them in silence. So let's talk about CHLORDECONE. Many people might have heard that before, and I know Dr. Pascal, tried to ring the bell on this many years ago. I have spoken about it also. It was introduced as an insecticide on banana plantations in the French Caribbean, right? It was sprayed liberally all across Martinique and Guadeloupe. And, we have to think where else, right? A lot of people from Dominica go back and forth, and Dominicans grow banana too, right? So how much of that came through the back door, right? Right? And this was a dangerous substance that was banned in the United States and Europe, right? Long after scientific warnings should have alerted them, they continue to use it in the Caribbean, right? So what has happened is we saw a sharp increase in prostate cancer among Caribbean men, especially Martinique and Guadeloupe, right? And this was caused by a chemical that should never have been introduced in the Virgin Caribbean soil, period, right? The problem with CHLORDECONE is not like any other chemicals. It can't be washed away by rain. It can't be broken down by the sunlight. It cannot be degraded in the soil by bacteria, right? Once it enters the soil, it remains there for centuries. I'll get more into that, right? Then it gets into the water. Then it moves into the riverways. Then it moves into the sea. And then it gets into the food chain. And once it enters the human body, it gets into your fatty tissue, your liver, your nerves, and your hormones. And that's where the biological disruption takes place, okay? So between 1972 and 1993, the world had already turned its back on CHLORDECONE. This toxic compound was continued to be used heavily in the French Antilles, right? They claim it was to fight the banana weevil. And we know we had that problem in Dominica, right? So again, without testing and understanding how much of that has impacted the other islands, the neighboring islands, right? So vast tracts of agricultural lands are contaminated in these islands, right? And then it got into the river and the coastal waters. As a matter of fact, it's enhanced when it gets into the coastal waters where it flourishes, right? It stays there, and animals and fish and other substances absorb this chemical, right? So entire communities did not know about CHLORDECONE, and that the fish and the meat and the root vegetables that they were consuming had lots of CHLORDECONE, right? Even today, as I speak, testing shows that significant portions of Martinique and Guadeloupe remains contaminated. Some experts predict that it would take more than 700 years, repeat after me, 700 years for the soil to naturally detoxify this chemical, right? The most disturbing element of CHLORDECONE crisis is how easily it infiltrates human life through food, right? The root crops I talked about, the vegetables, the fruits, the seafood, contaminated waters, the riverway, the springs. And then there's the occupational exposure, the farm workers and the plantation laborers. Not understanding these chemicals, you see how they spray drenched in chemicals, no gloves, no masks, no warnings. And then there is this maternal transfer in women. Mothers exposed to CHLORDECONE can pass the toxin to the unborn children. Blood tests today show that up to 90% of the population in the affected areas in Martinique and Guadeloupe has detectable levels of CHLORDECONE in their system. Even infants born decades after the peak of its use are testing positive. You see the crisis? You see the environmental issue? You see the biological disaster? This is multi-generational. Scientific research is unequivocal. CHLORDECONE exposure is strongly associated with the increase in prostate cancer in the Caribbean, especially the French Islands. Right? So men with higher CHLORDECONE exposure have significantly increased prostate cancer risk. The exposure leads to a more aggressive form of the disease, right? And then you look at the CHLORDECONE, what's called the contamination zone. There's an increase of the incidence in those areas, right? So Caribbean men, especially in the French Antilles, we're already genetically predisposed to prostate cancer. We now face a double risk because of the careless, right, use of a chemical. And I call that the residual of colonialism. Right? This is no coincidence. It's a direct outcome of environmental negligence. And we see what's going on in Dominica, right? At places like Point Wrong. Right? I mean, Day Blanche. Sorry. At Day Blanche. And you see what's happening in the rivers. You don't know what chemicals are getting in there. Look at the Layu River, right? How much of these chemicals are getting into the water, and how long do they stay? CHLORDECONE will be there for 700 years. Generation after generations will be affected by it, right? And it's not just a carcinogen, meaning that it forms cancer. It's an endocrine disruptor, right? It interferes with the body's hormones. It mimics estrogen, and it disrupts testosterone pathways, right? So it makes tissue vulnerable to malignancy. This is a real issue, and it took Dr. Pascal coming on the radio a few years ago to sound the alarm on this. And there's not much conversation, right? What's the incidence of prostate cancer in Dominica? Have we tested for CHLORDECONE, right? Because we know that people go back and forth and they bring things back from the French Islands. And if we having a banana problem in Dominica at the same time, and you see them treating in Martinique and Guadeloupe, the chances of CHLORDECONE being used in Dominica is pretty high, I would say, right? Our communities were never informed. There were no health warnings, right? This was not an accident. This was a decision because, again, how they view us in those parts of the world, right? The CHLORDECONE issue represents one of the worst cases of environmental racism in Caribbean history, and we're not talking about it. We're not talking about it. So I just wanted to bring this, out and talk about CHLORDECONE and talk about how it has impacted the Caribbean in terms of prostate cancer and how long it's going to be around, right? It's a problem that will outlive every single one of us. Right? Your child's development, your pregnancy, your neurological health, your hormonal balance, right? These are the kind of things that has happened. We need bold steps to be taken to be accountable for the chemicals that's being used in Dominica and in places like that, because we don't know what's going to happen 10, 15, 20, 100 years from now. Right? And we might say, well, it's not insecticides, right? But you have heavy machinery going into waterways, digging. You don't know what's in there. We don't know what's been imported. It's a disaster. So public education is key. That's why I'm here putting this out. And I hope this video goes far and wide, because this is about educating each other, right? Testing the soil, testing the water, right? Testing the people's blood levels, right? And see how it's going to impact, the future generations, right? This is my call to you, to consciousness, right? CHLORDECONE is more than a chemical. It's a symbol of the Caribbean struggle against exploitation, neglect, and environmental injustice by Europe. I just wanted to put that out there. Have a great day, guys. Peace.